Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers.
Well, good evening, everyone. This is Margie K, and this really is Unex News, but we're having a number of problems lately. I had just all kinds of difficulty connecting with our guest tonight, but all kinds of other things have been happening lately. And I don't know, maybe trying to block us from doing this show. I'm not sure, but it really is the Unex News this evening. So we've got an excellent guest tonight. I know you're going to like this show. And if you're into weirdness and paranormal and UFOs and hauntings, you're going to like this guest. Anna Scott is a lifelong experiencer whose encounters span the paranormal spectrum: UFOs, ETs, ghostly manifestations, and cryptid phenomena, including Bigfoot. Her deep immersion in these mysteries began in the 1970s and evolved into decades of serious investigation. Guided by both firsthand experience and scientific curiosity, Anna earned degrees in applied biological sciences and nursing, and brings over 20 years of public health expertise to her work. She's also the North Dakota MUFON state director and a field investigator since 2018. She's led numerous case studies involving UFO sightings and contact experiences. Welcome to the program, Anna.
Hi, thank you for having me, Margie.
Well, I'm so glad we finally got together.
Yes.
And we'll just cross our fingers that nothing horrible is going to happen during the broadcast and take us out like a tornado, because we've got another storm coming here. So do tell, let's start at the beginning. How did you get interested in paranormal subjects?
Well, it wasn't so much of getting interested in something. It was basically what surrounded me growing up. So I didn't really have an option. It was always present in one form or another.
Okay, well, that happens to some of us in the world. We get hit over the head with paranormal, and our friends and neighbors have nothing going on, even if they live in the same house with us. How do you account for that?
Well, in my case, a lot of people around me experienced strange things when they were with me. So I was fortunate in that way. But overall, I think it really, the common denominator is some form of a consciousness connection. I really do believe that. There is so much overlap between all of the different genres of the paranormal. There has to be something there that connects them.
Well, we would be on the same page as far as that is concerned. Definitely. So you have degrees in applied biological sciences and nursing. How does that help you with your investigations?
I think the easiest way to understand that is to go back in time and figure out, talk about why I pursued science. And a lot of that stems from all of the strangeness around me growing up. I definitely was a kind of a weird kid. I will have to admit that. I saw the world very differently. I seemed to know things that my friends didn't know. And when I was about, maybe fifth grade or so, I noticed that there was kind of a split, and that most of the kids in my class and that surrounded me in the neighborhood went off to more normal lives, and I kind of lived in this unusual space. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that I didn't really understand all of these different things, because if they were happening to me, why aren't they happening to everybody else? I didn't like some of the negative reactions that people had that were with me during some of these strange events. And I really wanted to understand it. So even, as a 10, 11, 12-year-old child, I decided that science made sense and it was predictable and, reproducible. And so that's really what pushed me into the realm of science, because I just had a deep need to try and understand what the heck all of this stuff was. And so the only class I really excelled in, to be honest, in school is my science courses. I felt comfortable and safe there. It made sense to me. And so eventually when I became an adult, I gravitated towards, scientific exploration in studies and in my work profession. I did decide to go to school and get a degree in biological sciences and worked in a clinical lab. So I have a lot of background in how to collect specimens, how to process specimens, different ways that you can contaminate things. It gave me a lot of background information on that. I also had an interest in environmental science. And so initially in college, I did have some field courses where I was out in the field collecting things. And so as you can probably imagine, those two things really helped me in ufology, doing those on-site investigations. But that's really where it came from.
When you were, well, let's say, at what age did the paranormal or the unnormal happen for you? When did that start?
I don't know. I don't have an age. My earliest memory is unusual. And so I'd like to think it started there. My earliest memory is maybe 2 or 3 years old. And I was in a very weird crib-like structure. And there were these strange people that would not let me go home until I drank this awful white chalky substance that I didn't like and I didn't want to drink it. And I've never quite understood what that was. I was in the hospital a few times when I was a child. So, I fully acknowledge that maybe it was some sort of distorted memory from that. But there was something odd about it. I don't know. And, as I progressed in grade school, I was in these odd studies that I've been doing more research on lately. I'm not really sure what any of that stuff really was about.
Okay, so what sorts of odd studies?
Well, there was a number of us in grade school that were involved in a fluoride study. And it was just a regular swish and spit and, I'm assuming some sort of dental type study. Does fluoride rinses help? And that's what I always thought. And I see that expression, and that's exactly what I started thinking about 20 years ago. But I remember also having to take these hearing tests, and there was different kinds of hearing tests. And some of them were normal. And I do remember other kids lined up behind me, and you had the headphones on, and you had to raise your hand when you heard the tone. But other hearing tests, they don't make sense to me when I look back at them. And if you've ever seen an Airstream trailer, there was a trailer similar to that. It was this big silver-sided trailer that would pull up in front of the school. And I would have to go out for my hearing test at least a couple times a year. And I remember there were times where there was other students. But by the time I was maybe in 4th or 5th grade, I was the only student. There was other things that I was the only student of at that time period as well. But I would go in and I would have these hearing tests. And looking back, they don't make sense because it was really a situation where I was in a box. It was dark. I couldn't see. It was definitely some type of sensory, deprivation type environment. And I remember very strange questions. Can I see this? Can I see that? And can I hear this? But they don't make sense as far as like a hearing test goes. So I do have these questions, and the more I search on that, the more I realize I'm not alone. And the other people that have experienced some of this, are in the paranormal community as well. So that can't be a coincidence.
Exactly. I have to tell you that for myself and other people I know in the field of paranormology and ufology, and they also have had these strange experiences as children. And it seems to me that the teachers somehow know that if they run across someone who has certain abilities, that they are to tell someone else, and then you have more testing done by another person or a counselor, or like in your case, outside of the school, and then weird stuff starts to happen. And I just think that there's some type of a secret program that's probably been going on for many years with the school system so that they can identify certain people. And it sounds like you're one of them.
I definitely had some unusual experiences. That is for sure. I've reached out to some people that I went to grade school with. A couple of them were in the fluoride studies, that they, at least what they remember, and they dropped out of those fluoride studies much sooner than I did. Something that's interesting to me is that those particular people, while not openly in the paranormal community, have a tremendous amount of empathy and concerns about the world around them. I find that interesting. I did as well. A story that I like to tell people about how maybe I wasn't a normal kid is when I was in 6th grade, my science project for 6th grade was a model that I created out of plaster. And it was of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area and the suburbs. And because that's where I live, that's where I grew up. And it was what would happen if a 10 kiloton nuclear warhead detonated over downtown Minneapolis. So, that really wasn't on the minds of most 11-year-olds in my class, but
No.
that was something that's always kind of been present in my life. And as you well know, experiencers often report a lot of concern about the environment and concern over nuclear weapons. And so when did that start? I have no idea. It's always been a part of me. But that just kind of goes to show you that even in 6th grade, I was a little different, maybe.
Indeed. And, you mentioned the fluoride study. And of course, we know now that fluoride really inhibits the pineal gland, which is the number one gland in the human body that allows us to, for good brain function, but also activates our psychic abilities, our sixth sense abilities, all of them, not just one thing, but a lot of things. And so that concerns me. But with your abilities now, and even going back that far, I just wonder if it wasn't fluoride, if it might have been something else.
Well, obviously I can't tell for sure what it was. I have used fluoride rinses, at the dentist as an adult, and the taste is almost identical. I don't discern any difference in the taste. So at least it had the taste of fluoride. And I would definitely like to know more about that. I have done quite a bit of research trying to get at those studies. Look at that research. It has to have been published someplace, and I can't find it.
Oh boy. Well, it's probably unreachable, would be my guess. Some agency has it that's got it locked up. Wow. Well, let's just delve into some of your experiences. What are some of the most dramatic paranormal experiences you've had?
Well, I've had quite a few over the years, and they seem to come about in clusters, is what I've noticed. And I haven't really been able to determine any pattern to the clusters. But there was quite a bit when I was in junior high school, that 12 to 15 age range. And one that always sticks out to me, and I've told a few people about it over the last few years, is there was in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there was a lot of parks. There was a creek that went along about a block from me, and there was park on both sides of the creek, and there was trails on both sides of the creek. And there, in order to get to my home, I would have to cross over a bridge. It was a very small bridge, but it did allow cars to travel over it. And so I was out late with some friends of mine. It was summertime. It was probably 9:30, quarter to 10. It was getting dark. And so we weren't walking in the park. We were walking in the street alongside the park. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was watched. I just knew, and I can't explain how I knew. And I looked over my right shoulder, and up along the power lines were these spheres. They were about the size of a basketball, maybe slightly larger. They were semi-translucent. And at that time, I didn't have a name for them, so I just called them bubbles because they looked very similar. They had that iridescence that bubbles do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I immediately told my friends, my two friends that I was with, oh my God, they're back. And they looked up in the direction that I looked up at.
Yeah. And
I just yelled, run. And so we started running. And there was myself on the left-hand side, my best friend who was in the middle, and her cousin who frequently hung out with us. She was the same age as us. And I don't think that my best friend actually saw anything. But we were running. She was screaming and crying. She just was really upset because she didn't know what was going on, I think.
Oh.
And there was about maybe less than a block between where we were at and the bridge that crossed over the creek. And so as we started approaching the bridge, I looked back over my right shoulder again just to see where they were at. And I saw one coming really fast, and it looked like it was going to actually collide with my friend's cousin's head. And so I yelled out to her, watch out. And she looked back, and she ducked at the appropriate moment. Wow. And so I know that she saw it.
Yeah.
And it as that was happening, we were approaching the bridge and turning onto the bridge because there was a left turn there. And the bubbles, instead of continuing to follow us or circle back, because there was one kind of behind us and then the one that almost hit her, they both went off over the creek. And so they left us alone. And I still remember looking out and seeing them go towards the creek. And I say both because I don't recall them being three of them. I recall two of them. There could have been three. There might have been another one that I didn't see. But I only recall seeing two. And as it was clear that they weren't coming after us anymore, they were going down the creek. And you could still see them. By this time, it was pretty dark. But they were, I wouldn't say they were glowing. It was more just a kind of an iridescent light. My best friend was in tears, and her cousin was like, what was that? And I clearly remember saying to her, I don't know what they are, but I know you don't want to end up in one. And wow. I've always wondered about that because I don't have any recollection of being in one. I acutely understood what they were. And I always want to make it clear that I wasn't really fearful of these. This was more kind of a adolescent, I don't know really what the word for it is, but I just didn't want to. It was more like defiance. Like, you don't have, you're not going to make me do this. I don't want to do this. And so it wasn't like I was afraid of what would happen to me if I was in one. It was more like I was afraid of, not even afraid, I was upset that they were there. And I didn't.
And with your friends too.
Exactly. And I didn't want to do what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So what actually happens in the bubbles, I don't know. My assumption based on that experience and other experiences that I've had with them is that it's some kind of transport device, but I really can't say that for sure. What I can say for sure is that it did irreparable harm to my friendship. And it was never the same after that because she just didn't understand. And that was not the first odd experience. It was the most dramatic, but not the first odd experience that she'd had with me. Interestingly, though, she went on to become quite religious, which was not something that she grew up with. And I haven't talked to her for many, many years. Her cousin went on to a career in military intelligence. And worked at some places that are very interesting in the ufology world. So I find
that's interesting.
Yes.
That the two of you are both involved in ufology in different ways. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
There had to be some influence there.
I would like to think that, yes. I tend to be more pragmatic and don't want to make giant leaps, but it would seem that there would be, yes.
Yeah. Well, lots of people have seen the bubbles or the balls of light or what orbs, whatever you want to call them. And of course, the jury is still out as to what they are. But the fact is, thousands and thousands of people have seen them. And of course, as a ufologist, you've probably heard many accounts from your witnesses. Have any of your witnesses described anything similar to what you saw?
Many of them have, actually, particularly when it's involved with my work with the ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team in MUFON. And as you know, we're a group of investigators that really make a choice to work with people who have experienced the phenomenon. And many of them have had a lot of trauma around it. And so there's a lot of parallels to things in my life that I've heard in those stories, those recounts of their experiences.
Yeah, the ERT team is a very valuable resource. It is completely separate, for those of you who don't know, that from MUFON investigations. There would be an investigator with a case, and then in the case of an abduction or contact, then there will be an ERT person to contact you. And that person is like you, Anna, has had their own experiences, and so they can better relate to the person and basically help them deal with the situation.
Yes, absolutely. And we have the ability within the ERT to provide some resources if they need referrals to counseling or support groups and stuff. But
yeah, well, that's I worked on the ERT for a while until I got too overwhelmed with other things. But it is something that's very needed. And, it's a very worthy thing that you and others are doing for people. Because, there are a lot of people have had strange experiences and encounters. Some people deal with it very well on their own. And they might have a curiosity about it, but they don't let it rule their life. And then other people have a very difficult time dealing with the fact that there's non-human intelligences out there that are visiting Earth or who are living here on Earth and are involved with humanity in some fashion. And of course, nobody has all the answers. But one of the things that I tell people who seem to be overly upset about the situation is, have they harmed you physically? And the answer is usually no. And are you still alive? Yes. So obviously their intention is not to wipe humanity off the earth, correct? And then they'll say, yeah, okay. So that usually calms them down so you can continue the conversation. Is that kind of what you tell people as well, or what do you tell them?
Well, in many cases, yes. It really just depends on what they need. So sometimes they're looking for advice or guidance, and sometimes they just want somebody to just listen to them and take them seriously. So I really gear any advice or guidance based on what they're telling me and what I think that their needs are. But overall, yes, there's certainly people who feel they've been harmed from the phenomenon. And there's a lot of people that aren't sure exactly what it is. Are ETs actually extraterrestrials, or maybe they're demons, or maybe there's some other type of entity? They're not really sure. And depending upon what their needs are, I will refer them to appropriate resources.
Okay, that sounds good. And we are up on a break, and we'll be back right after these messages.
The Unex Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unex Network website at unexnetwork.com. That's unexnetwork.com. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we're back with Unex News. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and this evening we are speaking with Anna Scott. And Anna is a UFO investigator, a paranormal investigator. She's had a lot of experiences herself. And about how many reports or investigations do you think that you've completed over the years?
Oh my goodness, probably hundreds. I guess I haven't really counted. And that really goes the whole gambit from UFOs and ET experiences to Bigfoot and other types, ghost encounters and haunted homes. And I'm going to have to check out your book that I just saw advertised. So that'll be an interesting read, I think.
Yeah. I think you'd like it. So let's just pick a topic right now. Let's say Bigfoot. What do you have to say about Bigfoot? Have you had your own personal encounters with this creature?
Well, I can't say that I've seen Bigfoot. I can say that I spent a lot of time in my youth in north central Minnesota, and I still am there quite a bit. And I've seen lots of dark, hairy creatures in the woods, but never a very good shot, kind of like a UFO, right? You can never really take a good picture. But I've heard lots of wood knocks. In fact, growing up, that was just kind of the background noise when I'd be up there as a kid. Both my sister and I would hear them, and we never really knew what they were and never really thought about it. And so when I first started researching, Bigfoot, what is Bigfoot, back in the mid 80s, I was like, wood knocks. Maybe that's what it was that I was hearing, because it certainly wasn't a bird. It definitely wasn't a woodpecker. I certainly know all the different sounds that they make. It was clearly a wood knock. So when I watched,
something like a heavy stick hitting a tree that would have be done by a big person or something, right?
And it has this very distinct sound. And my sister and I have talked about that over the years. It's like, why didn't we ever go out to the woods to investigate that? We should have as kids, but we didn't. And I have heard it even the last few years. The property that I have backs up to thousands and thousands of acres of state forest. And so there's really nothing behind me. I could literally walk for days if I was going in specific directions and not find any roads. There's, the different Bigfoot teams exist in the area, and some TV shows have been up there doing some episodes in the past. So, in fact,
sounds like an ideal squatchy area.
It is. In fact, I was just in Reamer, Minnesota at the Reamer Bigfoot Days Festival. Reamer has coined themselves as the Bigfoot capital of the world. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But there's definitely a lot of people interested in Bigfoot up there, and I think for good reason.
Well, it certainly has been seen everywhere. Do you have you done investigations for other people who have witnessed Bigfoot?
So I haven't done investigations for other people who have witnessed Bigfoot. I have done investigations with other people to see if we could find evidence of Bigfoot, though. And in one investigation, I tried a little trick to see if I could maybe capture something. There was some unusual impressions in the ground, but it wasn't quite obvious what was causing them. It could have been large bears, for instance. There's a lot of black bear in that area. And so I put up a trail cam, a high quality one, and had it set to immediately film if anything came in. And so, of course, I got lots of trees moving and other things because of the setting that I had. But I had placed a heavy plate with some snacks, and I know it sounds kind of funny, some snacks and some wood carvings and some other little things that supposedly Bigfoot likes, as a gift, a token gift. And interestingly enough, the plate was on the ground. Okay, not so crazy. Maybe it was a big animal that came by. The trinkets were gone. And when I took a look at the footage showed everything just fine. And then immediately the next frame was everything was gone. The plate was on the ground. There was nothing in between.
Oh, okay.
So, it made me wonder what exactly happened there, because I don't think a bear would have done anything. I would have seen if it was a human being, I would have seen him in my other cams. And I didn't see any of that. So I still wonder what the heck happened there.
Well, there has been some theory that Sasquatch can manipulate time and space. So it certainly sounds like that might have happened in that case.
Yes, I wonder about that. I was doing my own wood knocks. And so it's a lot harder to make that sound than you would think, actually.
Oh, yeah. Right. I've tried to do it.
Yes. And this was in an area where, again, I had seen impressions both in the soil and in snow. Actually, I have some pictures of my foot up against what looks like a Bigfoot, but I can't be certain because there was some melting that occurred in the snow. And, that scientific mind wants absolute proof. I need to make sure that I'm ruling out every possible thing, and then what's left is probably what's true. And so that's something I want to do some more work on. I find it fascinating. And then there's another part of me that says, do I really want Bigfoot coming towards the house? Because I'm not quite sure that I do, right? So there's that piece as well.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that. Someday I'll tell you a story about an encounter. But let's get to UFOs now. So you saw the bubbles, balls of light. Have you seen a bona fide UFO?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Several times. Some strange things around that too. So I will out the town in this podcast. I was in this little town called Cavalier, North Dakota. And Cavalier is a typical small town, very rural area, not a lot of people or population there. But what it does have nearby is a Cavalier Air Station. And it used to be part of a very large, it was called the Mickelson Safeguard Complex. And it was, back in the Cold War, we had radar systems and intercept missile systems to protect our country. Mm-hmm. And so there's lots of unusual things about that particular complex that I won't get into here. But that's the reason why I was up there. Mm-hmm. And I was staying at this little motel in town. And one of the things that I typically do in the evening is I go for my evening walk. It's just relaxing for me. It kind of helps center myself. And so I was walking around this town, and the town is small, and I was walking along basically the perimeter. It was a residential area. It was paved road, and there was homes on both sides. And to the east of me, behind the homes, there was nothing but fields, so you could see for a very long ways. And as I was walking along, I was aware and thought it was peculiar that all of a sudden everything was quiet. Yeah. I've experienced this before a number of times. Jenny Randall's termed this the Oz factor. So I noticed that happening, and it caught my attention. And I stopped in the middle of this residential street, and I looked over, and I saw what I can only describe as a massive warehouse-sized and shaped white object. And it was roughly a mile away, roughly 2,000 feet in the air. A little bit difficult to gauge size and distance because the topography up there is very flat and there's not a lot of trees or background. But that's my best estimate. Mm-hmm. And I just stood there in the middle of this residential street and watched this thing. And it was moving very slowly. There was no sound. It might have been too far away to hear. I'm not quite sure, but it was extremely large. And I'm just standing there watching it. And I noticed that the only sound I can really hear, other than the sounds my own body is making, breathing and whatnot, and crunching a little bit on the gravel underneath me, is this squeaking noise. And so I happened to notice this little girl on a swing, and she's swinging back and forth. And she sees me just standing in the middle of the street staring off, right? And so she got off her swing, and she looked around behind her. And she yelled out to her mom, "Mom, what is that? What is that?" And then I could hear a door open, but I couldn't see the door. And I heard a woman's voice say, "Get in the house." And so she went in the house. And so I stood there for, I'm not quite sure how long. My guess is 10, 15 minutes, something like that. Just staring at this thing. And finally it moved enough so that I couldn't see it. It was behind homes and I couldn't see it anymore. So I started walking, and I walked along the street for another 2 blocks or so. And I would stop occasionally when I could see it between homes, off in the distance. And The strange thing is that I had my phone in my back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't think to take a picture.
No, you didn't.
You know, there was no noise. There was no noise at all. And I was aware of it, but my mind wasn't quite there. It's really difficult to describe that feeling. And as I approached Main Street, I really couldn't see it very well anymore. And instead of, what I should have done was, you know, rush over behind these homes and take out my phone and take pictures, right? No, I didn't do that. Right. I got bored and was like, and started walking away from it. And as I did that, all of the sounds of the city, the small town, I shouldn't call it a city, came rushing back in. And all of a sudden there was cars that I could see on this main street that, you know, I could see life and human beings, and I could hear the dogs out barking in the background and the birds chirping and just the normal background noise that you would hear in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept walking about another half a block, and there was this little gazebo in the center of town. And so I sat down and I pulled out my phone and I started scrolling through Facebook. And I was like, it hit me all of a sudden. It was like, wait, what just happened here? Yeah, why didn't I take a picture? I had my phone. You know, it drives you crazy.
That, you know, that's very typical though, of people who see something that's so fantastic. They go into a kind of, I don't know, hypnotic trance or shock. And I've done it myself, not pulled my phone out to take a picture, and I have it on me. And you just don't think of that until it's gone. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, where's my phone? Yeah, there is something that happens. And that, you know, what you described without hearing sound, kind of like being in a vacuum, that's also very typical of people who have close UFO encounters.
It is, yes.
I have a feeling it wasn't quite as far away as you initially thought. Maybe it was a little closer, but you were in the field. You were in the EMF field, whatever that was, you know, type of energy that was creating. You were in it.
Yes.
And yes. And it alters time, space, reality.
You know, it really can. When probably about 2015, I finally decided that I'm not going to hide in the shadows anymore. I'm actually going to go out and do investigations that aren't, you know, whispered, hey, have you heard anything? Kind of things that I've been doing in the past. And I really kind of came out in the UFO world and joined MUFON and did all of those things. And in that process, I went and I did a whole bunch of road trips, and because I love to travel. And so I went to all of these different sites that supposedly there was a UFO crash. You know, I fought with the cattle near Corona, trying to get to the site, and got permission to park at the Heinz house. And, you know, before I took off on my 2.5-mile trek through Rattlesnake Hills and cattle. But,
no.
I've done all these crazy things, right?
Yeah.
So during that whole process, I had kind of a affinity towards Sunspot, New Mexico, and there was some interesting things about Sunspot. But since I was out there, I wanted to go to White Sands, and because they have a national monument there, it's beautiful out there. And so I went out to the monument and I started hiking through the gypsum dunes, and same thing happened. All of a sudden, I was looking north towards where the Trinity site would be. And I remember, the only thing I really remember, I don't remember seeing a craft. I remember seeing a light. And then I remember hearing this weird tinny sound from voices that were far too far away for me to be able to hear what they were saying. It was a family on the dunes, maybe a 1/4 mile away, maybe a little farther. And they weren't yelling or anything. They were just talking, and I could hear them perfectly. but it almost sounded like it was coming through a transistor radio. And I mention this because it was identical to the way the little girl sounded and her mother sounded in the Cavalier incident. And
Oh.
I heard no sound other than my own breathing and them. I looked out. I didn't see any vehicles. I didn't see any other people. And I almost felt a little high or something. I can't really describe the feeling other than I felt giddy. And it was a very surreal experience. And so I ended up kind of wandering around, and it's like, this is really strange. And I thought, well, you know, gypsum is used in soundproofing. It must be that. And that's why this all sounds so strange. And if you've ever been out there, some of those dunes can be very, very high, 40, 50 feet or more. And I decided that I was just going to jump and slide down one of these. And I literally laughed the whole way down. And that's not typically me. And I got down to the bottom and I started walking, and eventually the sound came back in again. And I thought, well, that was weird. I got in my car and left the monument. And so I'm going down the highway there, and there's Holloman Air Force Base on my left-hand side. I would have been on my left-hand side. And these fighter jets that made zero sound, no sound at all. I didn't see any means of propulsion on the back end. They flew right over my car. And living in Fargo for many years, I'm acutely aware of what happens when a fighter jet flies right over you. It's ear shattering. You know, I could feel the heat from the afterburners many times. And there's kind of a shock wave that kind of hits your car. None of that happened. I still don't know exactly what they were. I know that they looked human in the cockpits. They had cockpits, but I found that interesting that there was that technology. But I thought,
so you actually saw in the cockpits?
Yes, they were that close. They were that close.
Oh, wow.
They were probably not even 50 feet from me.
Okay.
I should have had my eardrums blasted and the paint bubbling on my car. They were so close.
Well, that's interesting. I've had a couple of what we would call big cases where we had aircraft show up that did not make a sound. And we also had invisible aircraft show up that sounded, that you could hear it, but you couldn't see it. So note, and it's interesting that this type of thing shows up when we think it's something of ours after a UFO sighting. And obviously they're there to check that out.
Yes. And the story gets even better. So, you know, I continue along the highway and skirt through the outskirts of Alamogordo, and I'm heading north because I'm planning on going up to Santa Fe and some other places on the northern end of New Mexico. And I had plenty of time. This was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. And so I'm going along outside of Alamogordo, and everything is normal and fine, and I can see the mountains, and I was just thinking, that was just a very strange experience. And all of a sudden, I feel really ill, and almost like I liken it to coming out of anesthesia, actually, because that's the only comparable thing that I can find in my memory. And it's almost dark. It's close to 9 o'clock at night. And I was really confused. And I pulled over. And interestingly, and I'm not saying it's related, but interestingly, this was Corona, New Mexico, that I was in. And I pulled over, and it took me a few minutes to kind of get my bearings, and I was just very groggy, and it was disturbing and alarming. And I was like, well, okay, I'm definitely not going to make it up to the north end before dark, because I really didn't want to drive late at night on the desert roads and stuff. So I remember looking through my phone, saying, okay, well, where can I stay? Because I really didn't want to stay in the motel in Corona. No offense to the motel in Corona, and I opted for a reservation in Vaughan, and it took me about 20, 30 minutes on the side of the road before I felt like I was well enough to be able to drive again. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what happened. I have absolutely no memory other than maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes north of Alamogordo and ending up in that spot. And another thing that is interesting, and of course, I'm always looking for evidence, my Google Maps, my timeline didn't know where I was either.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah. And so it knew that I went down that stretch. So I know that there was cell service, there was coverage. It wasn't like there was no data available during that area, because it registered my going south, but it didn't know where I was going north. And it was just a gray line. Didn't know where I was.
Okay.
So,
well,
it's part fascinating to me and it's part disturbing, because I don't like not having control of, kind of what's happening to me.
Do you try not to travel by yourself anymore?
No.
You do travel by yourself?
I travel by myself all the time.
Okay. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I'm trying to have somebody go with me, because just like your experience, I have had experiences where I feel strange, like something is going to happen or something has happened. And then I got ill. I got so ill that I couldn't keep going, and I had to find a place to stay. I just wonder how many other experiencers have that type of experience.
That's a great question. One that I don't know. I've had enough things happen to me when I'm with somebody that maybe it's better if I'm not with somebody. But
yeah, that's true. Because you got to think about the other person too. Sometimes, I suppose.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't feel physically harmed in any way, other than feeling that really like nauseated, groggy feeling that's similar to coming out of anesthesia. But it was disturbing, to say the least. So
yeah, indeed. Well, we've got a couple minutes to go. What do you have coming up? Anything new, different? Any investigations? What's on your schedule?
Well, I always have quite a few different things on my schedule. Of course, I'm quite involved with Northland MUFON, and we're always doing interesting things. We're doing some things at expos. But myself personally, aside from MUFON, I am looking to really reach out with some of the paranormal communities in the area, because I really do feel that it's more than just ufology. Certainly in my own experiences, I have had many, many experiences with entities. I don't know what they are. I'm not convinced, other than my grandmother and a couple people that I know that have come to visit me, that they are dearly departed. I would really like to explore some of that more. That was very prominent in my life growing up and as a teenager, and I've spent some time trying to ignore it because it's challenging with the kind of work I do. Acknowledging the spirit world, but
right.
That's
that left brain tries to kick in and say no.
Well, yeah, when you're somebody that's around people that are dying, and there's some walls you have to kind of put up around yourself just to protect yourself. So as you probably well know, and now I'm not working so much with the dying, and I'd like to get back into some of that, kind of bring down some of those walls.
Well, that sounds good. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing some of your experiences with us. I hope you'll come back again sometime soon,
I'd love
and we'll delve into more of your experiences. It's certainly an interesting life, isn't it?
Interesting, yes.
Yeah, never a dull moment. It's
No.
once you go in the rabbit hole, you're in.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that is another episode for Unexplained News, and I will see you again next week. And we have a new show coming up in August, so stay tuned for that. We've got a new program coming. I'll see you here again next week.